Reflections, a granddaughter of the late Michael Manley. And so let us welcome Miss Rhea Manley.
Former Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Mark Golding, the Honourable Jeremy Corbyn, Dr. the Honourable Christopher Tufton, Minister of Health and Wellness, Professor Denzel Williams, Dr. Heather Ricketts, Professor Anthony Tony Bogues, distinguished guests and visitors, good evening. My family and I would first like to express gratitude to the UWI Faculty of Social Sciences, the P.J. Patterson Institute for Pan-Africa-Caribbean Advocacy, and the Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs at Brown University. We are all very grateful to all involved in planning and executing this conference, and pleased to once again celebrate my grandfather's legacy with Tony after the gripping lecture he organized at my grandfather's alma mater, the London School of Economics, where my aunt and uncle shared remarks. We appreciate, too, that you have brought the conversation home to the UWI, which will now house significant Michael Manley artifacts and papers for contemporary and future scholars to work with. We're truly heartened by these events, which honor the legacy of the work he started, which is so important to be expanded on and continued today. I'd like to open my reflection with the most vivid personal memory I have with my grandfather, who would have balked at being addressed in that way, as he asked us not to call him Grandpa, but Max. But I was about 6 for this visit. The first tooth I would lose was wobbling, and I was anxious, probably because everybody around me was. He was not well at this point. Everything he said is a blur, except when he asked whether I would leave my tooth with him when I twisted it out of my mouth. I had heard about the tooth fairy, and I was expecting to trade what had filled the new gap in my mouth for hard cash. He offered a fair exchange, but I told him it wouldn't be the same. He looked at my parents, winked, and said he would get it to her, and I would be paid twice for the tooth. Union for the fair trade of teeth. I come to you humbly quilting lore around my now contextualized child-sized Capezio leotard and I Love Cape Town dress, tokens he brought from trips. As for most of his large life, I wasn't there. Nevertheless, memory is a curious thing and can create connections in curious ways. I've been fortunate to grow up hearing stories about him from my loved ones, to meet him through the people he may have sent a personal note to about a shared hobby he managed to have time for, such as horticulture or sports or the arts, people he worked closely with in government, and people who he never met, who have very passionate feelings about the effect he had on their life. Having our surname and moving around in Jamaica means casual and professional introductions can be peppered with any relation in varying tones, followed either by awe or contempt. Attempts to decontextualize ourselves have proven futile, as Max was not parochial in his crusade against injustice. I have gotten the question in Portland, Oregon, Savannah, Lamar, and Port of Spain. My grandfather created shocks and waves through Jamaica and the world with his public endeavors, which were motivated by his unyielding determination to achieve social justice, illustrated in his youth when he opted to leave Jamaica College rather than accepting a caning from his headmaster. Norman Gervin astutely observed that his response may have been engendered from his socialization at home, where notions of Jamaica as an independent nation with a need for its own identity were stirring from Norman and Edna. I feel that he continued this with his children. They say that it was never the case that he tried to mold them into his worldview, but that they, and by extension their descendants, are rooted and grounded in it as a family, almost as though it's in our DNA. Through growing in the example of it and seeing firsthand from the inside how he showed us all in that quote of his that we all know so well that the word is. I see it live on in brave spaces where people feel moved and move with conviction. The world has entered an epoch of emboldened imperial might, where hegemonic powers have become alarmingly barefaced with their now fully witnessed atrocities and suppression of human rights. It's important to take stock of where we are today on questions we have concerns about: the status of regional and international literacy, gender equity, wars of occupation, climate equity, and the myriad issues the world now faces. The Caribbean will do well with more leaders of conscience who understand that decolonization is not a historical flashpoint, but rather a deeper process of emancipation that each generation must respond to in the context of their time. I put it to you to consider the ways that you might move beyond spaces of physical and intellectual comfort to move close enough to the injustices that you indict, not just to condemn them in abstraction, but to intimately understand the conditions of inequality, to step outside of the safety of thought, and to act, using your compass to find what love means for you.
Her grandfather would be proud of her. Thank you so much, Miss.